defend up to this point the country that he loves, the union that he wants to preserve, but he's also torn because Virginia is going to secede. Virginia is his home. He's a Virginian through and through, and ultimately Robert E. Lee will make the decision to leave the Confederate Army. He'll leave for Richmond about a week or two after he makes that decision. When he leaves here in 1861, he will never set foot on this property again. Mariana stays back for a while, packing up the family goods, trying to stay home, but eventually things get too heated. She's right across the river from the Union capital. She doesn't feel safe, so she too heads down to Richmond, where she can be closer to her husband. But she does something, or forgets to do something before she leaves. She forgets to pay her property taxes on all of this land and the house. So in 1862, she sends a servant up to D.C. to go take care of her late taxes. But the government isn't feeling particularly generous towards the Lee, and there is a man named General Meigs, M-I-E-G-S, General Meigs, who has a problem. His problem is there are a lot of bodies piling up during the Civil War. There are 600,000 who will ultimately die during the 4 years of the Civil War, 2% of the American population at that time. It's the bloodiest battle, or bloodiest war in American history in terms of American losses. And General Meigs has been charged by Abraham Lincoln to find a place to bury these bodies, find a place to lay them to rest. So when the Lee's servant comes to pay their taxes, the servant's already late, and the government says no. Only the property owner can come and pay taxes. We cannot accept a proxy or a surrogate. So they send the servant back on their way, and they then seize this property, including the house, for failure to pay taxes. And General Meigs has a solution to the problem he needs. Meigs sets up headquarters here at the home, and starting in 1863, he'll start burying Union soldiers in what was Mrs. Lee's prized rose garden. By the end of the Civil War, in 1865, there are 1,500 Union soldiers buried on this property. So then there's a bit of a problem. The United States has this piece of land that was unlawfully seized. They've been using it as a Civil War cemetery, and they're not sure what the Lees are going to do when the war ends. Robert E. Lee takes the high road. He's now moved down to Lexington, Virginia, started a university, and that death toll from the Civil War really weighs on Robert E. Lee, and he doesn't want to disturb what has become a cemetery. And when he's pressed and asked about it, he says, "Let those men lie." He and his wife start new in Lexington, and they never return to their home. After Robert E. Lee dies, the first thing his son does is sue the United States government to get this land and property back. So just for a little bit of comparison, I need someone to remember, you'll remember, $92.70. Okay, $92.70 is what the Lees owed in tax the year that their property was seized. So Robert E. Lee gets his court case together. He sues the United States government. It goes all the way up to the Supreme Court. In the Supreme Court case of Lee versus the United States, in a 5-4 decision, the Supreme Court sides with the Lee family and does insist that the government return all of this property, land, and damages to Robert E. Lee's son. Of course, his son doesn't actually want to move back here and live here. It is a military cemetery. There are 1,500 Union soldiers buried here. He doesn't have any intention of living here. So he strikes up a deal with the government, and he tells the government they can buy back all of this land in the house for $150,000. So how much did the government need in tax money? $92.70. And they ended up paying $150,000 for this land and the house. That would be about $3.5 million today. So quite an acquisition deal. From that point on, Arlington has been a military cemetery. Some of that land has been ceded off for other things. That's why we're down to 600 acres, not the full 1,000 acres. Since the mid-50s, though, this part of the cemetery that we're at, where the house is, has been preserved by the National Park Service. They are restoring the house and restoring that land so it can be remembered for its place in Virginia history and American history as the Washington Custis Lee home. All of the soldiers that had been buried here were disinterred in the 40s and moved over into the oldest section of the cemetery, which is behind you, and they've been reinterred here in the Civil War section. So there are actually nobody buried right here. We are going to get a chance to walk up to the house, get a look at that beautiful view. I will give you a few minutes to pop in the house.